Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari. This is a great big history podcast. History 101, World Civ 1, from Lucy to Leonardo. And in this episode 2, we do trauma, evolution, and early nomadic societies. All life evolve with trauma. Why? All living is trauma. As someone wrote, it's life is going to kill you. And that's true. There is the possibility of death, which equals constant terror. The fact that you can die, that animals can die, is a constant source of terror. And most death in the world is getting eaten. It's not a pleasant death. It's not being surrounded by your grandkids as a squirrel and going off into the great forest beyond. No, it's getting eaten by something. And so life is, in our DNA, is fear of death. And that trauma that it can always happen. So our ancestors, our pre-hominid ancestors, our pre-human ancestors, are losers. We lost. Humans are losers. Why? Because we got kicked out of the forest. Pre-hominids got kicked out of the forest by competition and climate about 4.2 million years ago. In the 19th century, we went back to Africa and said, we have conquered Africa. We have conquered. Look at the chimpanzee. Look at the gorilla. We are obviously connected. We are primates. We are all one because we look similar and we act similar. And we are obviously the victors because we left the forest and we conquered the world. No, we got kicked out because you don't go to a place that you don't have any food supply, that you don't know the environment, that you don't have any protection. As a winner, you can only go because you got kicked out. Bye, loser. So that trauma of being kicked out of the forest forced an evolutionary adaptation to survive. Humans had to change, or we would have been killed. We didn't have the protections of the forest. We didn't have the food supply of the forest. We had to change. And remember, there's only one human, Homo sapiens. All our other humanic ancestors died. They all failed. They all died out. They all went extinct. There's only one. We are the loneliest species. So how do we change? One is bipedalism. We learned how to walk on two legs. Why? Well, first, and maybe I'm hoping it's true, but the way I was taught it when I was growing up was you had to see over the grass. That the small pre-hominids had a problem if you're on all fours, if you're bent over. As when you're going through the grass, you can't see the lions, the hyenas. You can't see the stalkers. We don't have a particularly good sense of smell. We don't have a particularly good sense of hearing. Anybody with a dog or a cat knows that. We have no scales. We have no battle armor. We are easy to eat. So what we figured out was to walk upright. That made us scary. That made us taller. And even though early hominids are 4 feet, 5 feet tall, humans are going to be 5 feet tall until really the 20th century, till very late. Greeks and Romans were 5'3" on a good day. The men on a good day were 5'3". Mediterranean peoples were 5'3" in the ancient world 1,000 years ago. Like, Jesus was not 6'2" with blonde hair and blue eyes. That's not, like, I'm not saying he was black African, but he wasn't blonde and blue-eyed and 6'2". He was 5'3". He was a Semitic man living in the Middle East, in the Mediterranean coast. He was like 5'3". You know. So it was. So Jeffrey Hunter, he wasn't. But okay, so we're going to walk on two legs. We're going to learn how to walk on two legs. We're going to learn how to walk upright. That's going to move our hips forward. We're going to have a straighter back. It frees our hands. What is the great advantage of bipedalism? Is it frees our hands. Like, what else walks on two legs? It's mostly birds who have wings. They need their wings to fly. And so it frees our hands for tool use. And that tool use brings about bigger brains. We end up with bigger brains. From hominid to hominid, the brains get bigger. In fact, one of the interesting things is the size of Neanderthals' brains. This is why we are not descendants of Neanderthals. We are cousins to Neanderthals. They had a bigger brain than humans did, which is kind of interesting, but it was less sophisticated. So Homo sapiens figured out how to have a smaller brain that was more efficient. If I understand this correctly, I'm not an anthropologist, and we are right now in anthropology. So if I have anthropology professors listening to this and be like, that's not quite correct, I'm totally with you, man. And I'm sorry. But our bigger brains allow for more sophisticated tools. The use of fire. The use of fire allows for nutrition, better nutrition, easier digestion. But bigger brains is a trauma for women. It's a trauma for women. It's the worst thing that ever happened to women. Why? Well, the way it was described by a comedian was, imagine trying to get something the size of a watermelon out through the space the size of a lemon. And you can imagine the problems. The human brain is as big as the birth canal will allow. It's probably actually too big, to be honest with you, because medicine has allowed children to survive who would otherwise have died and who would have killed their mother. So there are children out there with who are being born with brains that are actually too big to be born through the birth canal. And that's going to be a trauma for future women as evolution progresses, because those genes get passed on, because the body goes, well, I guess that brain was big enough. We survived. Passing on genes. But this is a trauma because you're walking on two legs. It narrows your hips. It thrusts them forward. It means you cannot give birth on your own. It means so you cannot give birth on your own, and the children that are born are fairly useless. A baby is a useless animal. It may be cute. I'm sure your babies are all cute. But they cannot survive on their own. Whereas in a few hours, a lot of babies can. See a rhinoceros born? It takes about, 20 minutes, and it's walking around. Hey, I'm a rhino. I'm a baby rhino. Give it a couple days. Boom. It's rocking and rolling. Give it a few weeks. Right? Human children are useless for the first 15 years of their life. They're too weak. They're too slow. They can't control their bowels. They can't speak. They can't even feed themselves when they start. And so we have a long period where children are useless because that brain needs to develop. That brain needs, those of you who have had kids have seen this happen in real life. You've watched a kid go from not being able to say anything to then say a word and then say sentences and then speak more clearly. But what does this all mean? 1, birth is the most dangerous thing to ever happen to women. In your lifetime, even today, birth is the most dangerous thing that ever happened to women. It would be the most traumatic thing to happen to you. I have come from a generation where all of the older women, all the boomer women I know who gave birth, who had children, all have trauma stories. And they would sit around at parties, at get-togethers. With, of course, it's the time, people would be smoking, there'd be a haze of smoke, and us kids would be playing. And the women would be like, oh, when Robert was born, he did all kinds of things to my insides. And every one of them had a traumatic story. There are some estimates that birth will kill about 40% of the women giving birth in this time period, in this prehistoric time period. Giving birth was like Russian roulette. It wasn't a question of if it will kill you. It was a question of when. Which child coming along will kill you? Because if the child comes out wrong, backwards, shoulder first, there's no medicine. Nobody knows how to do anything. The only people who knew anything were women who had given birth. And so that was bad for everybody. If there was bleeding, there's no way of stopping the blood. And more importantly, you gave birth in dirt, on the floor, which meant infection, what the British used to call in the Victorian age childbed fever. You gave birth, you were exhausted, 3 days later you got a fever, and 3 days after that you were dead. It's sepsis. Those of you who have given birth know this. All the stuff that comes out, lots of stuff can come in. And any of that can cause an infection. And without penicillin, in fact, until the invention of penicillin and antibiotics, women lived less than men. We now live in an age where women outlive men, but until the early 20th century, women lived less than men. Their life insurance for a young woman was expensive compared to a man's. Now, my wife's life insurance is cheap. They threw it in. They're like, oh, well, we're making our money on you, Mr. Gennari. Your wife, we'll throw it in. We'll just double it. That's fine. She's not going to die anytime soon. That's what penicillin did. Penicillin made medicine. Because before penicillin, your doctor was as likely to kill you as not. They killed Washington. They killed plenty of people. And women suffered terribly. Because men didn't know anything about what was inside a woman's body. So men were not allowed near women giving birth for most of history. Even my own father wasn't allowed in the hospital room. Like, that was a recent kind of change, and most hospitals still hadn't done it yet. So by the time my youngest brother was born, they were having a celebration with my dad in the delivery room. But when I was born, it was no. Men aren't allowed here. Hospitals used to have a bar in the basement for men to go drink while their babies were being born. You'd walk in and be like, oh, I'm delivery room number 2. And you'd be, oh, I'm delivery room 7. And you'd all just wait. So what does this all mean? I know I'm getting off track, but I'm not, because we're going to talk about this all the time, because it affects women, which affects society. Because now that you have big brains and you're bipedal, you can't give birth on your own. I've watched these videos on Twitter and on YouTube, and they're like, oh, this endangered rhino giving birth. It does it on its own. Went off, did the birth. It didn't need people around it. Humans need people. Chimpanzees, gorillas go off on their own, give birth. Humans need a society because their children are useless. Someone has to help raise them because the parent can't always do it. So you need more people around, and you need other people to help you give birth. So the advantage is you have a society. You can rely on other people. You are not alone. The problem is You have to deal with those different people and their wants and their needs, and you have to feed all of those people. So survival becomes the number one question. How do we get enough food for our society, which we have to have? No man is an island. Nope. You need to have people around you. So how do you survive? And that is the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. You're going to hunt and gather your food. You're going to get seasonal migration. People are going to move. And very quickly, humans left the savannah and left Africa. We left in 3 or 4 different major waves. Homo erectus left. The ancestor to the Neanderthals left. 1 million years after that. 200,000 years after that, Homo sapiens left Africa. There's these migrations of hominids out of Africa and to new places. What are they? Why? For sightseeing? No, they need food. They're looking for food. And they're looking for places with less competition. To offset, to make life easier, Homo sapiens eventually learned animal domestication. They domesticated animals. They used animals' reproduction. They controlled animal reproduction in order to make animals more useful for humans. Around 30,000 years ago, that's dogs. Now, dogs provide protection. Panthers, lions can't sneak up on you. You can't sneak up on a man with a dog. The dog will hear you coming. Dogs are also going to be used for hunting, to flush out animals, to help you hunt. And they're going to eventually be used and taught how to herd. So they're going to do the job of a child as well, herding animals. Now, what animals are there to be herded? Well, for 15,000 years, none. But around 13,000 years ago, humans begin to domesticate sheep. Why? For wool. We domesticate sheep for wool so that we can create clothes, so that we can live in colder weather, colder climates. 12,000 years ago, we domesticated goats for milk. Now, you can eat sheep and goat, but you don't want to. You'll eat them when they get old. You'll eat them if you have to, but you'd much rather use them for the reproducible resource that is wool and milk. And that milk is more important not as milk, but as cheese. You could turn it into cheese curds originally, and then harder cheeses later on. Why? Cheese is portable protein. That's what cheese is. It allows you to take protein with you for when you can't find food that you're hunting. So what is people's lifestyle? It's one of poverty. No ownership of property or land. Land doesn't matter. It is the most communist of communist lifestyles. Everyone contributes. Everyone receives what they need. Everyone gives to the society what they can, and everyone receives what they need. So when people say, oh, communism has never worked, I'm like, dude, humans are communist for the first 4 million years we exist. Communism is the basis of our livelihood. Capitalism is 500 years old. Trade is 5 to 10,000 years old. Trade for some kind of currency. Trade for money is 2,000 years old. Trade for, like, I have a lot of beaver skins and you have a lot of meat is probably pretty old. But trade for money is relatively recent in humans' existence. Communism, where you contribute and to the society and everyone receives, is the normal way humans existed. Everyone contributed. So let's ask, who does the hunting? Who goes out and stalks the meats, the roast meats, the protein, sitting silently and waiting? And who picks the berries? who picks and finds and gathers, puts them in a little basket. Who does that? And which one of those jobs? The hunting? Ugh, the hunting. Or the gathering? Which is more important to survival? Well, you know, the men do the hunting. Yes, they do. They do the hunting. And the women do the gathering. Now, can men gather? Yes. Can women hunt? Yes. But overall, this is a pretty gendered dynamic. Men kill the beast, and women gather the berries. And who is more important to survival? Exactly, women. Women's calories are far more dependable, and if you've ever gone hunting, you would know this. You could go hunting and spend all day and catch nothing. You could spend all season and catch nothing. I went to school in northern New York. The school shut down for the first day of deer season. And the question was, did you catch anything? It wasn't, how many did you catch? It was, did you catch anything? No, man, I didn't even see one. You know? And some people will be like, oh, I got my one. I got one for the season. You know? Maybe two. Right? But you didn't know. And you could spend all day, all of those calories, and catch nothing. So women's calories are more dependable, which made their work valuable. And we're going to see this be important again and again and again, because when women's work is valuable, they have rights and freedoms. When their work is not seen as valuables, they lose those rights and freedoms. So women in hunter-gatherer lifestyles are important to the survival of the group, which means they have rights and freedoms, especially over their body, who they will have sex with, who they will marry, who will be the father of their children. They will have a say in that. They will have control over their body, as far as the society allows. Remember, you live in a society. A group of people, about 25. Now that 25 is part of a larger group of about 500. So it's not just 25 forever, it's 25 who are related to this larger group of about 500 wandering the steppe. S-T-E-E-P. S-T-E-E. S-T-E-P-P-E. Excuse me. S-T-E-P-P-E. Right? But now you have a say over, I don't want to marry this guy, this son. I want to marry the other son. I want to marry. Right? But you also didn't have complete freedom and choose whoever you wanted. Right? Society also was like, your parents had who they wanted you to marry, and the other women of the tribe would have who they thought should hook up together, And so everyone has a say. So you were never totally free, but you're never totally free even today. So because women's work is valuable, they have rights and freedoms. And because they have rights and freedoms, they also have positions of importance. They are workers who contribute. They're priests to the gods. They're midwives. Of course they're midwives. They're giving birth. They're delivering babies. Men don't know how to deliver a baby. They're judges. They're the archive. An old woman has forgotten more about what has happened to that tribe than anybody else even knows. And by old, I mean like 50. And I don't, I'm 52. No, in the ancient world, you died by about 30 of old age. So if you were 50, you were old. If you were 70, you were like old was in your name. You were the crone. You were the old maid. You were the old nan. You were 70. You outlived everybody. No one alive could remember a period when you weren't around. You have outlived probably about 2 generations by that point. At 70, you're telling little kids about their parents when their parents were alive, much less their grandparents. So, childcare, archives. Occasionally, women will be warriors and leaders. Though, when we talk about warfare, we'll talk about why that's less the case. But occasionally, women are warriors and leaders. And this is a success. Humans colonized the globe. The problem is other hominids more than animals. Humans left the food chain. We are no longer worried about getting eaten by animals. Occasionally, you're like, oh, shark attack and oh, alligator attack. But that's rare. Like, that's so rare we talk about it. Right? But war, murder, assault, abuse, other people are what we're really afraid of. Okay. So we're going to talk about warfare in the next episode, I believe. And so be safe. Take care. See you soon.